You have probably scrambled an egg the exact same way, every single day, for years, without ever once questioning it. Eggs feel too simple, too basic, to have any real secrets left in them. Chinese kitchens have been quietly proving that wrong for generations, using precise little techniques that turn the plainest, cheapest ingredient in your fridge into something silky, restaurant-grade, and genuinely shocking the first time you see it work. Today, we are counting down 31 Chinese egg tricks, starting with simple fixes you can use tonight and building toward techniques so effective they will actually change how you cook eggs for the rest of your life. Number 31. Stop adding milk to your scrambled eggs and use water instead. Almost everyone grows up believing milk makes scrambled eggs richer, but in a hot wok, it does the opposite. Milk is mostly water with fat and milk solids mixed in, and those milk solids can actually make eggs taste slightly diluted and cause them to brown too fast at the edges before the center finishes cooking. Plain water, on the other hand, has nothing in it to interfere, and it converts instantly into steam in a hot wok, which is what physically separates the egg into light, fluffy curds instead of a dense, flat sheet. Chinese restaurant cooks have used this swap for generations, and it costs you nothing to test side by side in your own kitchen tonight. Number 30. Shock your hard-boiled eggs in cold water twice, not once. Most people dunk a boiled egg in cold water a single time and call it done. Chinese home cooks shock, drain, and shock again in fresh cold water. The reason this matters is temperature contrast. It is the rate at which the egg white contracts away from the shell membrane that creates the gap needed for easy peeling, and a single shock often is not enough of a temperature swing to fully separate the two. The second shock finishes the job, and the shell comes away clean almost every time. Number 29. Add your salt to the boiling water, not after the eggs are cooked. Salting the water before you drop your eggs in does two things. It begins seasoning the white as it firms up, and it helps seal any hairline shell cracks shut through a mild coagulation effect at the crack site, so you lose less egg white into the water if a shell splits during boiling. A tablespoon per liter of water is plenty, and you will notice far fewer of those wispy white streamers trailing out into the pot from cracked shells once you start doing this every time. Number 28. Spin a raw egg to tell it apart from a boiled one without cracking it open. Give any egg a spin on your counter. A raw egg wobbles and stops quickly because the liquid inside is sloshing against the momentum of the shell. A hard-boiled egg spins fast and steady because the solid interior moves as one single mass. Chinese kitchens use this constantly when eggs get mixed up in a busy fridge with no labels. Number 27. Let your eggs sit out at room temperature for 15 to 20 minutes before cooking them. Cold eggs straight from the refrigerator cook unevenly, since the outside sets long before the inside has even started to warm through. Bringing eggs closer to room temperature first means the heat spreads through the egg more evenly once it hits the wok or the pan, giving you a more consistent texture from edge to center. It is a small window of patience, but Chinese cooks who prep eggs for a whole family meal often pull them out of the fridge the moment they start prepping vegetables. So by the time the wok is hot, the eggs are already at the right starting point. Number 26. Splash a small amount of Shaoxing wine into your beaten eggs before scrambling. This is a classic Cantonese kitchen trick. The alcohol in the wine helps break down some of the egg's sulfur compounds that cause a slightly metallic, eggy smell when heated, and it evaporates almost instantly in the hot wok, leaving behind only a faint aromatic sweetness. The eggs taste cleaner and more refined, which is why restaurant scrambled eggs often taste noticeably better than what most people make at home. Number 25. Freeze leftover egg yolks with a small pinch of salt or sugar mixed in first. Raw yolks frozen on their own turn into a thick, gel-like, unusable mass because the proteins bind too tightly together in the cold. Mixing in even a tiny amount of salt or sugar before freezing interferes with that protein bonding just enough to keep the yolk workable once thawed, which is exactly the technique used in professional kitchens that need to bank yolks for future custards and sauces. A quarter teaspoon of either 1 per 2 yolks is enough, and it is worth labeling the container with which one you used, since a sugared yolk belongs in a dessert custard and a salted yolk belongs in something savory. Number 24. Poke a tiny hole in the rounded, wider end of the egg with a pin or a toothpick before boiling it. Every egg has a small pocket of air trapped inside the wider end of the shell, and as the egg heats up in boiling water, that trapped air expands and has nowhere to go, which is exactly what causes shells to crack during cooking. A single small puncture gives that expanding air a controlled escape route instead of letting pressure build up until the shell fails on its own, and Chinese cooks who boil large batches of eggs at once rely on this to keep their cracking rate close to zero. Number 23. Crack your eggs twice before fully separating them from the shell. Crack once against a flat surface, just enough to fracture the shell, then use your fingers to check for any embedded shell fragments before you let the egg drop the rest of the way into your bowl. This two-step method catches shell pieces before they ever touch your beaten eggs, which matters enormously once you get to techniques that require perfectly smooth, strained egg mixtures. Cracking on a flat countertop instead of the rim of a bowl also produces fewer shell fragments in the first place, since the sharp edge of a bowl rim tends to shatter the shell into more smaller pieces than a flat surface does. Number 22. Add a splash of rice vinegar to your poaching liquid before dropping in the egg. The acid in the vinegar speeds up how quickly the outer layer of egg white coagulates once it hits the hot liquid, which tightens the white around the yolk almost instantly instead of letting it feather out into long, wispy strands. This same principle shows up in Western poaching, but Chinese home cooks apply it just as often in savory broths and hot pot bases, where a clean, tight egg white matters for presentation. Number 21. Add the smallest pinch of baking soda to your eggs before scrambling them. Baking soda raises the pH of the beaten egg slightly, and that small chemical shift helps the proteins trap steam bubbles more effectively as the eggs cook, which is what gives you that noticeably puffier, lighter texture you get from restaurant scrambled eggs. Too much baking soda turns the eggs soapy tasting, so a pinch really does mean a pinch, something closer to what would sit on the tip of a knife. Number 20. Crack your egg directly into hot oil for a few seconds before scrambling to get real wok hei flavor. That brief moment of the egg sizzling and slightly charring at the edges in high heat is where the smoky, slightly toasted aroma known as wok hei actually comes from. It is a fast, high-heat contact reaction, not something you can recreate by cooking eggs low and slow the entire time, which is why home stoves that cannot get hot enough often produce flatter-tasting fried rice, no matter how good the technique otherwise is. Cast iron and carbon steel woks hold and radiate heat far better than non-stick pans for this exact reason. So if you have been chasing that smoky restaurant flavor without success, the pan itself may be as much of the problem as your technique. Number 19. Whisk a small spoonful of water or light stock into your beaten eggs before they hit a hot wok. This is called velveting, and it is one of the most important techniques Chinese restaurant chefs use for eggs. Milk thins the egg without doing much else, but water and stock convert into steam almost instantly in a hot wok, and that steam physically puffs the egg curds apart as they cook, giving you light, airy pieces instead of dense, tightly bound egg. This single adjustment is often the entire difference between restaurant fried rice and the flatter, denser eggs most people make at home. A tablespoon of water or stock per 2 eggs is plenty, and it is worth noting that the water needs to be whisked in fully before the eggs hit the wok, since a poorly mixed batch will steam unevenly and give you a mix of airy patches and dense ones in the same batch. Number 18. Cook your scrambled eggs over medium-low heat and pull them off just before they look fully set. Real Chinese restaurant scrambled eggs are almost never cooked all the way through directly in the pan. Chefs pull the eggs while they still look slightly underdone and let residual heat finish the cooking off the heat entirely. High heat the whole way through is the single biggest reason home scrambled eggs turn rubbery, since the proteins overcook and squeeze out moisture before you even notice they are done. Pulling the pan off the burner about 10 seconds earlier than instinct tells you to feels wrong the first few times, but it is consistently the adjustment that makes the biggest visible difference in texture. Number 17. Strain your beaten egg mixture through a fine sieve before steaming it into a custard. This step alone removes the small air bubbles and any stringy bits of egg white membrane that cause holes and an uneven, pockmarked surface in a finished steamed egg. Chinese steamed egg custard, known as shui dan or egg water at some dim sum counters, lives or dies on this one step, and it is the step most home cooks skip entirely because it feels unnecessary until you see the difference side by side. A fine mesh sieve works best, and pressing the mixture through with the back of a spoon rather than pouring it takes an extra 30 seconds, but catches noticeably more of the foam that would otherwise turn into surface holes once steamed. Number 16. Use a ratio of roughly 1 part egg to 1.5 parts warm water, not cold water, when making steamed egg custard. This precise ratio is the real secret behind a smooth, silky, almost pudding-like texture instead of a rubbery, over-firm one. Warm water keeps the temperature gentle enough that the protein sets slowly and evenly, while cold water can shock the mixture into an uneven set, and too little water in the ratio simply gives you a firmer, denser custard closer to a plain cooked egg than the delicate texture you are actually after. Most dim sum restaurants stay close to this exact ratio every single time, specifically because it is the most forgiving starting point. And once you have made it once at this ratio, you will immediately understand why home versions so often come out disappointing by comparison. We are just about halfway through this list now, but trick number 15 is where things start getting genuinely strange in the best way, so do not walk away yet. If tricks like this are the kind of thing you want more of, I put over 900 of them into one place. The Complete Chinese Kitchen Bible. Links in the description. Now back to the video. Number 15. Cover your steaming bowl tightly with foil or a small plate, then leave the steamer lid itself slightly ajar. Condensation that drips from a fully sealed steamer lid directly onto your custard is the most common reason steamed eggs come out looking pockmarked and uneven on top. Covering the bowl blocks that drip entirely while cracking the outer steamer lid lets just enough excess steam escape that the cooking stays gentle instead of turning aggressive and bubbly. Number 14. Fix cloudy, clumped egg drop soup with a light cornstarch slurry added to the broth before the egg goes in. If you have ever ended up with a soup full of dense egg clumps instead of delicate ribbons, the problem is usually that your broth was too thin and reactive. A small cornstarch and water slurry stirred into the hot broth first thickens the liquid just enough to slow the egg down as it hits the pot, letting it set into fine, silky strands rather than seizing into clumps. A single teaspoon of cornstarch mixed with a tablespoon of cold water is usually enough for a full pot of soup, and it should go in a few minutes before the egg, giving the broth time to thicken slightly before the egg ever touches it. Number 13. Pour your beaten egg through the tines of a fork in a slow, thin stream while gently stirring the soup in one direction. This is the actual restaurant method for those perfect wispy egg ribbons you see floating in high-end egg drop soup. The fork physically breaks the egg into fine threads before it ever touches the liquid, and stirring the broth in one steady direction keeps those threads separate instead of letting them clump back together as they cook. Number 12. Finish your egg dishes with a small drizzle of sesame oil and a pinch of white pepper right at the end of cooking, not during. Both sesame oil and white pepper contain aromatic compounds that break down and lose intensity when exposed to prolonged heat. So Chinese home cooks add them at the very last second, off heat or nearly off heat, specifically to preserve that sharp, fragrant punch instead of letting it cook away into something flat and muted. This is the same reason sesame oil is almost never used as the primary cooking fat in Chinese kitchens, since its aromatic compounds are simply too fragile to survive sustained high heat without turning bitter. Number 11. Understand that a true Chinese century egg is not actually rotten. It is chemically transformed on purpose. The egg is cured for weeks in a mixture of clay, ash, salt, and quicklime, which raises the internal pH dramatically and breaks the proteins down into that dark, jelly-like translucent texture with an amber color running through the white. It is a controlled alkaline curing process, the same basic chemistry behind things like lye-cured foods elsewhere in the world, just applied with a very different result. Modern versions sold in most Asian grocery stores rarely use lead compounds the way some older traditional methods once did, so the commercially packaged ones you buy today are considerably safer than the folk reputation the dish sometimes carries. Number 10. Pair century egg with silken tofu, and know that it is not only about texture, it is about balancing chemistry. Century egg on its own has a sharp, mineral, slightly metallic aftertaste that comes directly from its high alkalinity. Mild, neutral silken tofu physically dilutes that intensity on the palate and gives your mouth a break between bites. which is exactly why this pairing shows up on nearly every dim sum menu instead of century egg being served completely on its own. Number 9. Crack the shell of your hard-boiled eggs all over before simmering them in a mix of tea, soy sauce, and star anise to make tea eggs. Cracking the shell into a spiderweb pattern without peeling it lets the dark marbled tea and soy liquid seep into the tiny fractures while the shell itself still stays on and protects the egg from falling apart in the pot. When you finally peel a finished tea egg, that marbled pattern running through the white is really just a visual map of where the shell had cracked. Number 8. Make your own salted duck eggs at home with nothing more than a strong salt brine and about 2 to 3 weeks of patience. Submerging raw eggs in a brine of roughly 1 cup of salt per liter of water, let salt slowly draw moisture out of the yolk over time through osmosis. That slow moisture loss is what concentrates the yolk into the firm, deep orange, slightly oily texture you associate with salted duck eggs. And the same process works on chicken eggs if duck eggs are not available near you. Once cured, the eggs keep for months, which is exactly why they became a staple long before refrigeration existed, and a jar of them sitting in brine on a counter was once a completely normal sight in a Chinese kitchen. We are getting close to the final stretch now, and trick number 6 is one that almost nobody outside a professional kitchen actually knows. Number 7. Poach your eggs directly in a simmering mixture of soy sauce, water, and a touch of sugar instead of boiling them plain first. Cooking the eggs directly in that seasoned liquid means they absorb color and flavor as they cook, which skips the separate marinating step entirely that most soy egg recipes call for. You end up with a soft, flavorful egg in a fraction of the total time, since the seasoning and the cooking happen simultaneously instead of back-to-back. A splash of Shaoxing wine and a star anise pod dropped into that same poaching liquid pushes the flavor even further, turning a basic soy egg into something closer to a proper braised dish in under 15 minutes. Number 6. Test a steamed egg custard for doneness with a chopstick instead of cutting into it. Press a chopstick gently into the center of the custard. If it comes out clean with just the faintest bit of give left in the surface, the custard is done. Cutting into a custard to check releases moisture immediately and can permanently ruin the smooth, unbroken surface that defines a properly steamed egg dish, so the chopstick test exists specifically to avoid that damage. A wooden chopstick works better than a metal one for this, since it does not conduct heat back into your hand and give you a false read on temperature while you're checking texture. Number 5. Reheat leftover eggs in a covered pan over very low heat with a few drops of water added, not in a microwave on full power. The small amount of added water creates a light steam inside the covered pan, and that gentle steam rewarms the eggs slowly without pushing them past the point of overcooking, which is exactly what happens when eggs get blasted with high, uneven microwave heat and turn rubbery within seconds. Number 4. Marinate your soft-boiled eggs while they are still slightly warm, not after they have fully cooled. Residual heat left in a warm egg slightly opens the protein structure at the surface of the white, which lets a soy sauce marinade absorb into the egg noticeably faster than it would into a fully cooled egg. This is why some soy egg recipes taste properly seasoned within a couple of hours, while others need an overnight soak just to get halfway there. If you are marinating a large batch for meal prep, warm eggs at the start of the soak and a full overnight rest in the refrigerator afterward gives you the best of both, fast. Initial absorption followed by slow, deep penetration overnight. Number 3. Whisk a half teaspoon of cornstarch directly into your beaten eggs before scrambling them, not just into soups and sauces. The starch molecules coat the egg proteins as they cook and physically get in the way of those proteins binding too tightly together, which is the same overcooking process that squeezes moisture out and turns eggs rubbery in the first place. The result is a noticeably silkier, more tender scramble that holds its texture even if it sits for a minute before serving, which is exactly why this trick shows up constantly in Chinese restaurant kitchens where eggs cannot always be plated the instant they leave the wok. Number 2. Let any finished egg dish rest off the heat for a full 60 to 90 seconds before you serve it. Whether it is a steamed custard, a scramble, or an omelet, residual heat inside the eggs keeps gently finishing the cooking even after the pan or steamer is removed from direct heat. This tiny pause is the step almost every home cook skips, and it is a large part of why restaurant eggs consistently look more finished and taste less overcooked than the same recipe made at home. It costs nothing and takes no extra ingredients, which makes it one of the easiest habits on this entire list to actually keep once you start doing it. And we are at number 1. The single most important rule tying every steamed egg technique on this list together, and the one thing that changes your results more than any other single adjustment. Always use warm water, never cold and never boiling, when you whisk your custard mixture together, and whisk it gently rather than vigorously. Warm water close to body temperature keeps the proteins relaxed enough to set slowly and evenly once steam hits them, while gentle whisking avoids incorporating the tiny air bubbles that turn into unsightly holes once the custard cooks. Every other steamed egg trick on this list, the straining, the ratio, the covered bowl, the chopstick test, all of it works in service of this one underlying rule. Get the water temperature and the whisking technique right, and a silky restaurant-quality steamed egg becomes almost impossible to mess up. Chinese home cooks who make this dish weekly rarely measure the water temperature with a thermometer at all. They simply test it against the inside of their wrist the same way you would test baby formula, and once you have made the dish a few times at the right temperature, your hands learn to recognize it without any tool at all. Everything in this video and 900 plus more is in the Complete Chinese Kitchen Bible. Links in the description if you want the whole set.